Hello everyone! Happy Wednesday! Welcome to Archetype, sponsored by Dell. I'm your host Ashley, and we're gonna have a chill Sculpin day. So if you weren't here last week, we did a bard character and we made him the race of orc, which I thought was fun. And we kind of played like with different orc ideas rather than him just being like a normal orc. So hi Alex, and hello Okaizedo. The usual crew is coming in. So I figured we could take our little drawing and idea that we did and we'll flesh it more out in 3D. I'm really liking this little reference that I got here. I just like the breakup a lot on the patchwork and everything, and it's neat, but also still kind of like orcish or kind of tribal feeling because it feels very put together by like animal skins and stuff. So we might play a lot more with that type of stuff in 3D as we get into it. But today's going to be a pretty chill day of sculpting and getting our block out set in there. So I'll jump right on in. So as usual, I usually like to start with good old Dynamesh. And just start blocking out, keeping it as simple as possible while also still trying to capture the main forms of our character. And I think it's really important. A lot of, I think, beginning stages, it's really easy to want to go really high up in resolution in Dynamesh, and then you don't have all those forms set properly, so it's really hard to kind of focus on those primary forms when you have too much geometry kind of in your way and doing a bunch of other stuff. So I like to keep this stage really, really low and work with what I have for as long as I can before I need to go up. And you can see even with this super low resolution, you can start to get the idea of a face. And then like I always do, I won't take anything super, super far. You don't want just a head floating, especially if we're doing like a full body character. So I'll immediately just start duplicating this and getting the neck in there and all that stuff. I'm starting to just get those proportions blocked out first. And then we can make more correct decisions or more informed decisions on proportion and where our characters, head should be placed or how hunched over should he be. We talked last week about kind of like doing like a Beauty and the Beast type vibe. This idea of this kind of beastie character playing, a flute or a lute or something is kind of like a fun contrast. So that was, the original kind of thought process and the idea behind it. So gonna try to make him feel like Hunchback Notre Dame or like Beast type vibe, and see where that kind of lands us in 3D. So I'll just start blocking out stuff like that. And I like to, again, I turn on groups, and then I make sure that I keep my auto groups, which is basically these pretty colors. So when I Dynamesh, these two parts stay separate, and now I can just keep expanding upon what I already have. So Okaizedo's asking about my shoulder. My shoulder's fine. It was just too much drawing and too much computing in one day. I'm gonna try to relax and not be so up into my computer screen, and we'll see if that helps. Hopefully it does. Fun fact, I also have tendonitis, so that sometimes plays into it too. I have to be very careful about, I have a bad habit of pressing too hard on my screen as well, so I gotta just keep out for all those little things, Hello, JD Smith. But yeah, so I'll be okay though, I promise. I'm not going anywhere. Again, I like to block out rib cage to compare to torso. It helps me kind of find the hard versus squishy shapes. Oops, sorry, I had a call and lost the connection there. But yeah, I like to block out basically what's going to be that hard rib cage versus what can bend over and you know, squish, and then I'll duplicate that and we'll make the pelvis as well, right? And have that sit there. Pelvis is kind of like a bucket or more. I like making it a little more square, whereas the rib cage is a bit more rounded. It's usually tapered from bottom to top, like a bucket also would be. Because you kind of think of the pelvis as where like all of your intestines and all the squishy bit kind of sits and is supported by all that stuff. So that's kind of how I like to simplify it. It helps. And I think the resolution's still, oops. A dot on my screen? There it is. Take that away. Okay. There we go. Keep it nice and low. And I'll block out the arms here. And again, another really easy way to block out those arms is I'll usually get the whole shape first, and then I can split it off into smaller shapes if I need to. That's an easier way, at least for me sometimes. It all depends, really, on what you want to do, but you know, we can take something like this now, and then I'll auto-group it, kind of mesh it, and then I'm gonna find the forearm, and probably group that, and then I'll also find, I like to split up the deltoid, so I'll split that up as well, and then now I have 3 parts. Oh, okay, Sato's saying that, oh gosh, I can't pronounce that right now. The word is there and my mouth is like, no, you can't pronounce that today, Ashley. Kinesiology, right? I forget how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. Don't make me say big words, guys. How dare you? Yeah, I think the other guy who does the creature corner, Jared, I think he uses it as well. I have been told that it helps a lot. I should look into that and see if that can help me. Especially since I am on the computer a lot doing these things. That would definitely help. One of those things that you tell yourself, you're like, I will do this thing, and then you forget. And then you're just like, oh, I'll just stay in pain. It's fine. Oops. Let's see through there. So I'm trying to get that block out in kind of as not as quickly as possible. I don't want it to be something that it's not like the race to get it blocked in. But it's important to not judge anything too soon before getting all your shapes in. That's really more of the part that's important in this process. And in our concept, we gave them kind of like little trilateral feet, so let's stick with that idea for now. I don't think I'm going to change it. I say for now, but I don't think that's going away. And now, you know, we can start to get a full body. And this is where it's a lot easier to see, okay, how big do I want him to feel? Because the bigger his body is and stuff, then obviously his head's going to be slightly smaller, you know, or there might be things to it that were... I have the symmetry not turned on again. Yeah, this is where we can start kind of judging what our, our head shape is going to look like and stuff too. This might be a little too small or too big, or whatever it is. Might need to give him like a bigger jowl and widen his head maybe a little bit. And then also he has some pretty crazy ears that we put on our character, and that was inspired from Jester's hats. And how they have like these weird crazy pointy hats, so we kind of took that inspiration of the shape and turned it into something else. So he looks kind of, the goal is that he's supposed to kind of look Jester-ish, so he has a bit of a not a comical look, but a bit of a nicer look. We're just extracting out the ears here. And all these silhouette shapes are really important to get in because they really dictate how you're going to be able to judge everything else. It's kind of like if you're used to painting or something, it's just kind of like color context, right? It's all about context of something else. Something will feel big until you put it next to something even bigger, and then that thing is the small thing, right? So it's the idea that your relationships between your shapes can't really happen until you have them all next to one another, and have them all fitting in the scene the way you need to. We also had some little horns and stuff in our reference as well, so I can take that. Adam doing tech, hello, welcome to the stream. I'm doing well. Hope you're doing well too. Thanks for tuning in on lovely Wednesday night. Wednesday night's pretty good. It's a good night to do art, but every night's a good night to do art, so. Now if we like these proportions, we can start playing with some other stuff too, like what happens if we lean him forward a bit more. And I'll just take his arms. I want the same orientation for the arms, so I can just kind of hang it down a bit more. Remember, this isn't really posing. This is thinking about like what's his like natural stance, right? If we look at someone like Beast as a character, then his natural stance is going to be a lot different than, like like Gaston's stance or something. His stance, I think, naturally is a little bit more like hunched over and things like that. Well, we have Adam working alongside me. I like it. That's what this is kind of here for. Chill background noise of someone else also doing art to inspire you to do some art. That's my goal. It's nice to have people that you know are also working while you're working. I think that was the power of going to Gnomon sometimes, was, you got to just be in the lab with other people who also, were trying to work and get stuff done. And I think it's just really helpful to be able to be surrounded by other people that are also working, and it just kind of holds you accountable. Now, a good thing to look at too is this thing called the plumb line, which is basically if you were to take a line and put it at kind of like the center mass, usually it's going to be somewhere around the clavicle, is usually kind of a good guess as to where it is. If you draw a plumb line down, you can see that, I'm sorry, my thing keeps calling. Oh no, I lost my audio. Okay, yeah. Anyway, sorry, I have someone trying to constantly call me, and I have to tell them to leave me alone. Otherwise, my headphones keep being like coming in and out. Okay, so what I was saying, Plumline. So Plumline, if you look at the where like kind of like his center is, you can see that his feet are a little too far behind. So he kind of looks like he's gonna like fall over basically, which isn't what we want. So we can bring his legs forward a little bit more, and that'll help kind of reset that position. Jacob is asking, do I prefer silence or music? I definitely prefer music, but there's times where maybe everyone's kind of done this before, where you get into like a certain zone while you're working, and the music has stopped playing, and you don't realize it stopped playing. I've definitely done that before, but I never mean to do that. It's just one of those things that I get into the zone, and then I don't realize that music is playing. But I usually listen to music that's similar to what we're listening to on the stream, where it's just something that doesn't have, lyrics or anything like that. If I'm really trying to like focus and think about stuff, then I don't want to be distracted by anything. Sometimes I'll watch shows or movies. If I feel like what I'm doing is more laborious or doesn't require a lot of like design thinking type stuff. So yes, that's where, it kind of depends on what I'm working on, but a lot of it is dictated by how much brain power do I require for said project, so that's why. Manifest saying what type of tablet is being used for sculpting. I use a Huion tablet, so there's a couple companies that you can use. One is XP10. Wacom is, I think, the most popular, but I recently stopped using them and changed to something else. So I use a Huion tablet. It's their screen tablet version. I think it's called the Canvas with a K. And so yeah, I use theirs, and I like it. I like it a lot. I use the 16-inch. I don't like the giant screens. Again, my shoulder would die after only a few sculpting sessions if I had to sculpt that big all the time. I'm just not used to sculpting very big, so. It does, but that question does bring back memories. You're right. We've asked a very similar question before. We always welcome questions. If it's your first time joining, then hello and welcome. This is Archetype with me. I'm Ashley. I'm a senior character artist, and I work for video games. Currently sculpting a bunch of scary Xenomorphs at a company, so that's a lot of fun. I also teach at Gnomon, which is a school I used to go to, and I teach Intro to Digital Sculpting. So I teach ZBrush there. So if you want to get your feet wet, it's a good place to do it. Trying to find shapes. I kind of want to try to find something fun. I'm trying to see if I want to play with his shapes being like really pushed and stylized. I know I usually do stylized, but I want to see maybe if I can do something even crazier than what I usually do. But I'm not sure yet, so I'm just pushing and having fun at the moment, just trying to find something. Jacob's asking if I teach online. I do not teach online. I teach actually in person. So I actually teach it in the school, where I get to see human faces, and it's actually pretty cool. So no, I do not have an online course, but there's plenty of other online courses that I'm sure are just as good as, taking me as a teacher. But yeah. I've been teaching for 4 terms now, I think. Yeah. So it's fairly recent. But I started teaching and then I think I started streaming as well. So I think as long as I've been teaching, I've definitely been streaming, if I remember that correctly. Or maybe it's vice versa. I don't remember. It all blends together so easily. Taking online classes with James. I'm not sure which James you speak of, but I'm sure it's all that they're all good Jameses. So, if you sculpt your face instead of Gnomon, does that qualify? Yeah, that definitely qualifies, Jacob. Jackal's Web is asking, is the sculpt based on a drawn concept? And it is. So if you haven't, I'm assuming you're new. So our process for Archetype is we come up, right now we're going through like D&D characters. And so this is a bard and we decided to do the class orc. So I thought it'd be fun to do a little orc. So I did a drawing last week and I'll do a stream of me kind of trying to ideate and come up with some sketches and ideas of like the character that I'm trying to achieve. So this is always in the other screen of mine that I'm looking at as a reference. So yeah, so if you want to tune in and watch me draw as well, I draw every week, every time we start a new character, I will draw. One, because I like keeping up my 2D skill, but 2, I think it's a great way to kind of figure out what you want to do in 3D before purely jumping just in 3D. It's a great place to kind of like sit and ideate and figure out some stuff before completely diving into 3D. Especially if you're new to 3D, because I'm just pretty long in my concept, so I'll try to match that. If you're new to 3D, then jumping into 3D with no plan is something that I usually don't recommend my students or a lot of people for a while, just because fighting the software is a whole nother thing, while also trying to conceptualize in a program that you're not used to concepting. Kind of like trying to do the hardest thing first in a new medium. Like if you're not used to watercolor, don't try to do like a portraiture or something. Try to like just light a still life, or start with some cubes or something, or have some sort of plan, going into it. Okay, Sato says that this line stream is kind of like an online class, and he's not wrong. If you guys ask questions about ZBrush or about the industry or about what my favorite dinosaur is, chances are I'll probably answer. That's what I'm here for. So yeah, you can ask away, and I will do my best to answer. But also note, I am only human. I won't have all the answers, but I can just give you at least my personal experience with stuff and hope that helps. But yeah, if you utilize this, you can definitely ask a bunch of questions in here, and I definitely welcome it, because otherwise it's me sitting in my room talking to no one. So you guys are my people, my voices that I can chat back with. So please don't be shy if you want to ask questions. You are not bothering me. That is the whole point. And if you guys just want to hang out and kind of lurk and have some nice, I guess maybe my nice voice in the background, then that is also cool. So no pressure to ask questions, but also if you have them, shoot them. No problem, Adam. I hope that's clear. Hopefully my friendly personality comes off as, hey, this girl seems like she wants to answer questions. I will sometimes today have slight moments of silence if I don't have much to say. I've decided. That way I can kind of focus more sometimes on sculpting if there's not a whole lot to be said about it, if I'm just kind of going through that process. Ooh, that's a question I was not expecting, so thank you, Jacob. If I was going to do a heist at a museum, which piece of art would I take? That's a tough one. If I put on my best Sly Cooper impression and wanted to take a piece of art, I actually don't know if I would take art. I secretly think I would like try to steal a Triceratops skull or like a T-Rex skull. I'm far more fascinated about like science, and I love going to museums and drawing skulls and drawing, you know, bones and anatomy. So I think if I could like steal a whole T-Rex, you know, or an Allosaurus or something, I'd probably steal that instead. So, but if you guys have, it's a good question just to basically ask what's your favorite kind of artist. It's a fun, creative question. If you guys also want to respond to the chat to that question, it's a lot of fun. Please do so. I'm also a big fan of Impressionists, so I love stuff like, you know, Monet and Van Gogh and things like that, or, you know, the classics. So why wouldn't you want to steal one of those? But I do love Impressionist paintings, because I feel it's very similar to what I try to achieve with stylized, where it's not so much about aiming for realism, but it's about making someone believe it's real and like have a feeling behind it. So that's what I enjoy the most. But yes, I would definitely be stealing some dinosaur bones. Actually, I have a 3D printer, so I should actually just print myself a little maquette of a dinosaur, and I don't know, do like bones on one side and then do like the musculature on the other. I think that'd be super fun. I've always meant to do it, and then I just never gotten quite around to it. So maybe if that's something you guys want to see on stream, maybe we can do that instead of a character. We'll do a crochet of a dinosaur, and I'm all for that too, you know. Maybe we can do one that's like stylized, so it's still learning anatomy, but you know, a way to have fun. I have a lion at crochet that's like that, where it's not a super realistic one, but it's more like kind of Disney-esque style. And you still learn all the structures and stuff, but it's more about learning the more important structures, rather than, you know, trying to name every single muscle in the body, which is still fun. And I try my best to know all the anatomy of, you know, what I'm sculpting or drawing or whatever it is. But it's not necessary all the time, you know. I think the most important part is knowing the shapes. I know plenty of really good artists that don't know what they're sculpting. They just are like, I know a form does like this here. They don't know that that's the sternocleidomastoid, right? And that's also okay to not know that. But I'm a science nerd, so I an animal anatomy nerd and creature person, so I personally like knowing that stuff. Oh, Jacob says he's working on a stylized dino right now and would love to know how to construct. Maybe we will do a dinosaur next time. I know right now we're technically supposed to be doing D&D, but there's dinosaurs in D&D. I am a druid in one of my campaigns, and I have a raptor companion, so dinosaurs in the list. I'm a big fan of them. So maybe you guys can post up some of your favorite dinosaurs. Maybe we can do a fun one. It's definitely in the cards. So you can see I'm just sculpting some anatomy and trying to block out. I like the really big upper body, and then playing with, you know, kind of like the smaller lower body. Because again, I think it's fun to have him look really like big and menacing and strong, and then he just plays a lute. Alex was asking if I ever watched the Tarot Whitlatch workshop DVDs, and 100% I have. It's actually, that's a fun story, that's the reason I even found Gnomon, was I wasn't looking for Gnomon, and I wasn't looking for a school. I was just at high school, and I ran across Tarot Whitlatch's Gnomon DVDs, and I was like, Dad, I need this DVD because I want to learn creature design. Can I have it? And my dad was like, what is Gnomon? I was like, I don't know. It's just like some DVD place. I really want it. And so then my dad was actually the one that did the research and was like, oh, Gnomon's a school. And I was like, oh. And then we took a tour and did all that stuff. And yeah, it was, and then ever since then it was, Gnomon or bust. But yeah, Tarot Whitlatch is the reason I found Gnomon, because I loved her artwork so much, and I was such a fan of her paleontological drawings, and her animal anatomy is astounding. So if you ever want to really get into animal anatomy, she's a great place to look for that stuff. So yeah, so that's always a fun story that I like to tell. So my obsession with dinosaurs actually is the reason I have a job now. It's because I love dinosaurs so much, and I love Tarot Whitlatch so much. I don't remember I'm trying to remember how I discovered Tarot Whitlatch as just like a person, and I think I just came across one of her drawings at some point, and then I found that she had the DVD. I think the drawing was probably just Googling like, creature something, or, animal art, or whatever it could have been, and finding the clips from the Gnomon DVD. Thing in the hands. Blobby hot dog hands, if you've ever seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, that's kind of my vibe. That's what I'm going for right now. We'll just leave him as like hot dog hands, and he'll have a lot of trouble playing his lute. Just kidding, guys. We're not going to do that. The best thing to actually do is sculpt one and then duplicate that one that looks good, but that's okay. Sometimes you just want more work for yourself, and that's totally fine. Or I like to pretend that I can't duplicate, and I'm a real artist working in real clay, and somehow that makes it feel better. Gotta find your points. Gotta find where those knuckles are in that arc. Hands are always the tricky one. Hands always will be. And they're important. I mean, besides the face, they express probably the most emotion of any, individual body part, really. They have so much expression. So when you combine, your hands plus, some sort of facial emotion or whatever it is, you can capture a lot of really in-depth, subtle things by just hand gestures. So knowing how to sculpt hands and knowing the nice apexes that create like a nice soft hand is always a good thing to learn. Again, you don't have to know, like, I don't necessarily know all the muscles in the hand, mainly because a lot of the muscles will be one in the palm, and it's usually just tendons that are going out into your fingers and stuff. But it's really more about knowing apexes and silhouettes and knowing the shapes of things. Again, more than it is knowing about, like, this is called a phalange, or metaphalanges, or whatever it's called, metacarpals and carpals and tarsals or feet. But who needs to know that? As long as you know the shape. That's all I care about. We can get something pretty quickly starting to look decent, and then over time, as we figure out more and more stuff, slowly other things start to get fleshed out. But I like his hands to be like big and chunky, and almost like big paw-like type hands, but at the same time, I want them to feel. It's a very fine line because, again, I think it's something that like Beauty and the Beast character does really well, where he looks really scary, but he can also be like really gentle. You know, there's this scene in the snow where he's like handing out the bird seed really aggressively, and she teaches him to like be gentle. And like when he is gentle, he can be gentle. I think that's the most important part about like why his design is so successful is to have something that can look scary but also feel gentle is good. You know, if you have a character that's, I don't know, really, really buff or really big and can't really like move or make gentle acts, then it's going to be harder to capture that performance, you know, when the person's going to be animating it, or if you're going to be drawing it, you know, and animating it, or, you know, whatever it is. So keeping those things in mind is important for like a production sake, you know. I remember reading or watching something about Tangled where Eugene or Flynn Rider was originally kind of like this really tall. He kind of looked like what the evil twin brothers looked like in the initial designs, where he was like really big and tall and like buff, because they wanted him to. They kind of didn't want to make like a generic proportioned hero at the time. But then they realized, like, well, if he's going to be interacting with Rapunzel and everything, like, it's going to be too awkward if he's like too tall, or you know, can't, or they have to like look down, or they have to be in the same shot and frame the whole film, right? So there's a lot of things like that too when you're designing. That you almost don't really think about if you're just creating like personal projects, you know, but it's like thinking about the pipeline after you and saying, you know, who's going to touch this after me, and, you know, is this going to work for what they need to do for the production. And they realized really quickly that Eugene being like a kind of like big lumbering giant type archetype wasn't really going to work. So yeah, I always thought that was pretty interesting, because trying to picture that movie where he's, you know, like that is so different from what it actually ended up to be. Ooh, Bernini's it. Sorry, I just read that you said Bernini. My bad, Jacob. But Bernini's a good one. I think I'm starting to like that. I think. This is where if I have like a body that's, I think, getting somewhere to where I want, I'm liking the silhouette, you know. I think we've got some nice fun round shapes, like his traps go directly into his deltoids here, which is his shoulders, right, and create kind of like these fun round shapes. So I'm trying to capture something kind of interesting there. Same thing with his legs. I could even trying to capture like one shape on the outside that kind of curves out towards where his knees are, and then curves in, and then we kind of mimic that same thing that we've got going on with his calves here in the back. Push that shape more. And again, because he's trilateral, I always think it's important. Most people don't. Not most people, but beginning students or people who are drawing, you know, animals, I see this really common, where they won't bow the ankle in. This is actually their ankle, so this is basically their whole foot, right? So what they'll do instead is they'll kind of do this number, or they'll try to put it straight like a leg, like a human leg, and you're always going to have a lot of trouble getting like a nice silhouette that way. And that's not really how those legs are bound, so they're always bowed in slightly. And you can always exaggerate how much they bow in, and so with that, I also make sure that the feet aren't pointing exactly forward, they're pointing a little outward, and that'll help just kind of solidify your silhouette a little better. Just with Ashley. Come again next week, you know, we have more tips. Yeah, I'm starting to like this like really big shape with the, you know, smaller pelvis, and playing with, you you want to play with like the big, medium, small. So, big would be maybe his forearms are the biggest part of his arm. Right, that kind of goes and blends in with his hand. And then small would be his bicep, and then medium would be his deltoid, right? So playing with these shape relationships where his upper arm, his humerus and the muscles that attach to all that stuff is actually kind of like the smallest part of his arm. And you can take that and go, oh, what if his, shoulders are the biggest, and then his biceps are medium, and then his forearms are small, right? And then you kind of get something that maybe was like that steampunk chipmunk we did. If you remember, we gave him like really tiny hands because we thought that was, somebody in the chat joked about it, and then I did it and was like, I actually really like that because it breaks up that, shape monotony that you can sometimes get if you're not paying attention to, your shape hierarchy of these big, medium, small shapes, and not just in the whole thing, but in smaller areas too, like putting it in the feet, putting it in the legs. So, the legs, they're kind of blocked by the hands, so we can look at them separately. But you can say, maybe big is his thigh. We can have small, maybe it's his, or medium or small is his kind of tibia and fibula here. And then, medium would be his leg like that, or we could do vice versa, where the longest or largest part is the tibia and fibula, has it small, and then medium is kind of his thigh, right? If you put them all at the same length and distance, then it doesn't create like a very interesting shape hierarchy. So if you want to make your silhouettes slightly more interesting, that's a really simple kind of like design 101 that you can do to start giving your shapes kind of like a pecking order, if you will. That very thin, which is fine, but I want to thicken up that bone there. I think he has a tail. We can add that later or now, but I think I'm gonna add it later. So I'm gonna take the face now, like I always do. I'm gonna split that away so I can start adding more subdivisions to the face to start getting the face right. Because again, I don't really need more subdivisions probably than this to get the basic idea of his, body anatomy and all that stuff, and figuring out where all that goes. So I don't like giving it more geometry than I need. You can get tons of information without adding that geometry here. So if you don't need it, don't add it. So in that case, I'm just going to split the head off. We kind of focus in on making the head. And we can split the ears off too, but I just won't. I'm not going to put them with the head yet because I want to be able to move the head and ears around to adjust to stuff. And again, we're going for that inspiration was originally here in my jester, right? So I thought it'd be cool if his war paint also that he has to put on actually kind of mimicked that of like a jester makeup. We could even like highlight his nose in a similar fashion. But this is where that inspiration came from for his ears, was the fact that we're playing off of the shapes of gestures, right? Whoops. Oh yeah, you guys can see that, something like that, right? And then the idea for his fur cloak and stuff was that would hang in little strips and triangles, and maybe we could put like little teeth at the end of it. So again, it's very reminiscent of, it's supposed to look like this, but instead of little bells, it's teeth or something. So I like doing stuff like that, is taking shape languages that we recognize as like an archetype or like a stereotype, and kind of turning it in a way that's more interesting, or finding inspiration in in a way that's not just like, oh, just make a gesture, right? Find what is it that we like about gestures, or what is it about that character that is interesting. And I think giving him like the long dopey ears is kind of is the difference. That's like his big part of his personality that's going to make him feel more gentle. Whereas if he had like sharp pointy ears, you know, or they were a lot smaller, you know, maybe he wouldn't feel as like threatening and stuff. Or he wouldn't. He would feel more threatening with, you know, those types of ears rather than having a, you know, big long dopey ears. We'll try to start getting in, you know, where his cheekbone and stuff would be. And I think we decided to give him just kind of like a human-ish nose, because I think before we played a lot with like, you know, animalistic or like beast-like noses, but he ended up looking too just like a beast and not orcish. So we'll see what we can play with in 3D. We can always kind of warp things around and move stuff, and see what can work, but for now, I'll give him a simple. We're gonna go for trying to give him like pretty gentle eyes and stuff as well. And again, I like to block in the eyes as like a sculpt first. So you can see maybe these eyes are a little too far apart or something like that. Maybe. It all really depends on character. But if I insert eyes now, like as a separate shape, that's going to be a lot harder of a shape for me to, you know, move in and adjust like I'm doing now. So I like to kind of wait on inserting, you know, a sphere, whereas, you know, this does the job. You can tell what we're trying to accomplish with just this. Hello, Gus. And remember, I think I said that I wanted his eyes to be very sunken, right? Because that's going to give him like that Notre Dame hunchback feel, where he's got these really big, heavy, you know, sunken eyes that feel really sweet. I think Tarzan kind of has it too, where his eyebrows are just like so sad and intense that he kind of has these like very soft, gentle eyes. So I kind of want to try to see how well I can capture something like that. You can see the heavier the eyelid we give him, you know, the more sad and like, I think, gentle he'll start to look. But we could easily take those big brows and make it, and I mean, I could even do it now, but we could turn this down, right? And we can start to make him really angry, and we could flare his nose and get really intense, right? And start pulling up his nasolabial fold. And easily he could turn very threatening, but the idea is you want to try to find a face that, you know, can perform in that sense. Since that's kind of the goal of the character, is to look menacing but not be, right? That's kind of the contradiction that we're playing with here. And then one thing I will do is I will insert some, you know, teeth. Oops, not there. Not there. There's some cones in here somewhere. At least there's like a cylinder that I could use. Let's put those, and then whoops, move those around. Okay, Sato's our welcoming crew. Whenever you see new people or anybody you recognizes, just gotta jump in and say hi, and that's what I like about it. If I can start putting in, you know, how And that's the other thing too, is we can play with, how big are his teeth going to be in relationship to everything else. Like, does his smaller teeth, is that going to make it more interesting, or like really big teeth? He's got like really big tusk-like teeth. Is that going to be something that's more interesting? Right now, I'm not really sure. But you can always duplicate this and then go back to the other one. And I can go back to where he has like smaller teeth. And you can kind of flip between the two and, figure out which one. If you guys have an opinion, please let me know, because I'm still flipping back and forth. I'm not sure yet. I feel like for expression and for getting his like soft eyes and stuff, I kind of don't want big tusks to get in the way of that, but we'll see. For now, I'm just gonna put anything as a placeholder. So. Try to put in his. It's interesting, like how a character would smile with such a heavy underbite or overbite. It's not underbite. Maybe that's where we can get a little bit of animalistic. We can put in like a little dual slit here, like animals have, but his nose can kind of stay. So it's almost like a philtrum, but more intense. So we could do something like that. I'm starting to like that face. Very gentle giant type face. Maybe hint at where his eyebrows would be. I think in my concept I gave him really big eyebrows, but we'll see how much I want to keep that, or if he has eyebrows really at all. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe just his big brow is his eyebrow. Gus is asking, are you making the concept in 3D here? And I am. And if you didn't join last, I almost said class, last stream, this is what we came up with. So it's a orc bard. And my drawing is pretty simple. Not super really heavy with the drawing, but it's fine. I like the sketches. I kept the sketches, and I like sketches. But yeah, so the idea is, he's supposed to look like this menacing beast-like character. So we're kind of playing off of, quite literally like Beauty and the Beast type vibe. But he plays, he's like a bard. So he plays lute, or maybe he'll play a flute. I have him just playing a simple lute that maybe later in 3D we can add some cooler, designs too. Even a harp could be kind of fun. But I really like this costuming here to make him feel like he's still orcish, but maybe give it design shapes that are more bard-like or more jester, right? Or more musical in that sense. Like these little puffy cuffs, is a really great sense of bard. These like loose sleeves, but at the end, maybe they've got like teeth and fur, and they're kind of stripped together like this type of vibe. So we're playing with those ideas. That probably won't happen this stream. We're just blocking out the character, but that's where we're at. And Gus says he didn't see the last one, but that is for Jesus. Jesus. And that's okay. You don't have to tune into every stream. I will try to show that, as often as possible to people who are new, who may not know that we start from a 2D concept and then kind of block it out in 3D. And I like the small horns that like go up into the brow and stuff. I think I want a bit more of a split between the middle of it's a little too merged at the moment, so I can Try to split that off a little bit. Then trying to find, where there is the jaw. And once I have the face, now I can dial this back and, try to find where the jaw would be and stuff like that, and where his cranium would sort of end. It doesn't have to be perfect. His cranium might be a little long. It looks a bit more, actually, it reminds me of like a gorilla cranium. We've got this like giant, crest, so we can kind of like play with that shape. Or gorilla-esque. And again, that's actually more of the importance of like learning anatomy or studying, different animals and stuff, is if you're, designing a creature or whatever, to be able to look at, the way you're shaping a skull and go, oh, hey, I know like an actual life reference, like a real life thing that I could use to help guide, what is fiction into something that feels more believable. And that's kind of the whole point. Add a lot of depth into the eyes. And looking at your sculpt from, weirder angles or all angles is important as well. Making sure that there's like a roundness in the eyelid and things like that. And also making sure that like the brow comes first, and then the eyelid, and then the eye, and then the lower lid. And then actually from that diagonal is the zygomatic arch, right? So this is where the zygomatic arch would stick out. So just trying to follow all those design points and apexes of the face so that we can properly block out the face. Because even though it's a creature, the more you land those landmarks of the face in reality, the more believable your creature is. Ludo from Pan's Labyrinth, yeah. Ludo friend. Yeah, that is kind of the vibe we're going for, right? It's something that looks like really big and haunting, but is actually pretty sweet. I like it. Right, and then usually, if I'm careful, it shouldn't have happened, but sometimes when you're sculpting onto your character's face a little more, sometimes your character's face will end up shrinking and being a little smaller than you intended. Just depends. In this case, I think we got out safe, but yeah, it's important to remember those things. And now what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll merge it down with the ears. And then I'll, I can kind of start sculpting the ears on top. Little friend, yeah. Yeah, my partner's actually really good at doing impressions, so he'll say that sometimes, and I swear it's like spot on, and it makes me laugh every time. So you bringing it up definitely brings a smile to my face, because it reminds me of that. We watched that movie like fairly recently, and yeah, it's great. David Bowie running around singing to children and kidnapping and harassing them. It's great. This crazy kingly costume. They don't make movies like that anymore. So just trying to add some depth into where the ear would be and find some sense in some of the anatomy. Trying to find where like that, where we know our human ear anatomy and where that would kind of lead into. And you can look at like things that have larger ears, like bats or something, if you want to. But I imagine a lot of this is more like quote unquote decorative. That is also true, Jacob, that they're just not making movies, but all for okay reasons, such as the writer's strike and stuff that's going on. And blend that more. I think I've had the ear a little too high, but it's okay. His ear's very, very exaggerated and big, so get some liberties with that. Might need a little more resolution, but not a lot. Definitely not as much as we did with the face. But I want to start adding a little bit more of his anatomy that can attach to his face now. So I'm gonna add and start making sense of all this anatomy that he would have. And find, where does his clavicles live? Where does that meet up with his, main shoulder girdle, which means all this is the trapezius muscle, which connects into the back here. This is probably also where I'll go grab my, I like this smooth directional brush. It's in brushes under smooth, and it's smooth directional. And I like it because I can make kind of like hard insertion points into some musculature here. And when I smooth in the direction of the form, I'll contain like a harder edge. But if I smooth the opposite direction, then it'll kind of smooth out. So it's a really nice way to like keep form or lose form wherever you want it to be like found and lost. So, here maybe I don't want it, but I can kind of sculpt that in the other direction and I'll maintain a form. So I really like the smooth directional brush, and once you get used to using it in ZBrush, it's super handy. And I can't really see not sculpting with it anymore. Well, ever since I found it, I've never stopped using it. It's a great brush. And this is where you can also look up, I could look up really buff, characters or, bodybuilders or something. And if I want to get this crazy strong with his musculature, you can look up real references to what we're kind of inspired by, or, get some ideas of shapes and stuff in there. I think all my characters that I've sculpted on the stream so far are pretty buff, but I don't think I've drawn one or sculpted one this buff before. So I want to kind of fix his leg here. It's kind of sticking out too much. Makes it kind of hard to sculpt on it. So now I should be able to blend the two here and make sure that I find that pelvic crest that's kind of like representing. 3D Pixel is asking, am I freestyling this? I mean, yes and no. So I have, some reference here of a drawing that I did last stream, last Wednesday. And I have some reference of like what I kind of want to maybe do with the characters' costuming and stuff. So this is what I'm going off of. But other than that, guess you could say I'm freestyling from based off of the forms that I somewhat established in the drawing. But so much of that changes once you start blocking certain things out in 3D. Just because you can cheat a lot with 2D, not cheating meaning it's bad, but you only have to draw one angle, so therefore you just make it look good from that angle, and you don't really have to worry about all the other angles. Whereas in 3D you can't really get away with that, so you have to start thinking about everything at all angles, and how, you know, how does his pelvis move, and how does his, you know, how do the hamstrings go up into, you know, the character's butt right now is to what I'm sculpting. And like, where's the musculature that's happening with all that stuff, and yeah, so figuring that stuff out is always gonna change and be slightly different once you get into 3D. You know, and this is kind of what I like about having those split parts, is I can go up into the armpit. I know the latissimus dorsi starts from there, so I can actually sculpt across those forms to get that lat building properly. Cool character concept is dope too. Thank you. Yeah, if you join in, I always take suggestions as well from our daily watchers and what things. Well, not daily, but weekly watchers. And yeah, I love getting ideas. So this character is not by any stretch of the imagination done. So, you know, trying to come up with a story or something kind of interesting for him is always really fun to do with the people watching. And as he sort of like develops in 3D, we get a better idea of, you know, who this character is and what he's doing, and, you know, what would he be really wearing, as we start to kind of like flesh him out. So the trapezius muscle actually kind of goes over the scapulas and kind of crosses. There's a bunch of like overlapping muscles here. Now again, whether if we decide to keep all that idea of muscles and stuff in the final sculpt, where maybe he's like super stylized, you know, maybe a lot of this will get simplified. But I think having the idea there to begin with is more important than never putting it in. So I like to try to figure out, like, how does my character move? How does my character, you know, work within these limitations of his body and in the world? And, you know, if we need to smooth stuff out or kind of simplify things later, we totally can. Right now I'm kind of just having fun sculpting like crazy anatomy. Because I think this time I want to obviously add clothes and stuff to him, but I also want to keep maybe his anatomy can be something that shows off a bit more. I think all of our other characters have a lot of clothes usually on them, so maybe we can play with more of a Hulk type vibe where we can show off more of the actual sculpt underneath, which we rarely as character artists really get to do. Most characters are not, you know, shirtless in games, so you'll do all this work for the anatomy and sculpting it, and then it just gets covered off by a baggy t-shirt in the end. So he's very buff now. Okay, so saying the face is looking cool. Yeah, I think the face is so far pretty successful. Once I drew the sketches last week, I had this like feeling, like, I don't think my drawing is the most executable drawing that I could have done of him, but I definitely, when I saw it and had the feeling of this character, I was like, oh, I know. I'd kind of it going into it. I was like, I think I'm pretty confident as to how I can achieve like the look that I want. For this character, so I actually was pretty excited to sculpt him today. The body I wasn't really so confident about, I wasn't so sure on, but as we're starting to like sculpt him more and more, he's like, the body's slowly coming together. He's got like tiny square butt now. It's funny. But yeah. Trying to round out his shoulders even more. And all this is just slowly building up you know, shapes and volume to stuff. And just adjusting things and, you know, fixing insertion points. Like, if this feels like it's merging in too much, that's why I like keeping everything separate, because I can just insert that in and I can get like a better overlap between the tricep and where the deltoid is, and get that feeling like it's really pinched in there and stuff like that. Sitting there. I think one thing that I probably sculpted too much on and lost a little bit was I liked the silhouette being simpler up here, so I want to dial back those traps a little bit. Because I don't want there to be, if you guys saw, like, if I carve into this real quick. So if I like carve this in really hard, right, to make a really defined like shoulder, I didn't want this like bumpy silhouette. I wanted the silhouette to be, you know, a lot smoother of a transition. And you can always add like a slight, you know, bump or curvature or whatever it may be, but I just want it to be a lot more subtle, because I think in the end, like, I think this character is going to be more stylized than going like super crazy, like realistic or anything like that. And then fixing things like, you can see the silhouette of his pelvis isn't quite there, and it's because the great trochanter, which is part of the femur, is like not sticking out enough. So I can kind of start to sculpt and build on top to get that silhouette to feel a little bit more streamlined, right? So this process is really more about like really still keeping an eye on silhouette and making sure that all that is reading properly. But even if you start adding detail or adding, you know, insertion points into musculature or whatever it may be, you still want that silhouette to read cleanly and properly. Actually, save. Oh my god, you're so right. You are so right. Thank you. I swear, you deserve something. I don't know what. I don't know what we can give you, but you deserve something for saving my saves all the time, for telling me to save all the time. I appreciate it. I would have been very sad if it crashed on me and then I lost all this work. Redoing stuff is not fun. It's like my least favorite thing, probably. Or save, cry less. 100%. I'm right there with you. I agree. I'm trying. I really do. Sometimes I get too into it. It's like if the music turned off, I wouldn't know it, probably, you know. Another thing we can start doing too is, I just think it helps for blocking stuff out, is we can, you know, start coloring him a little bit. So trying to find like a green that I like. That was too saturated. Be very picky about that. And then fill that object. Fill this object. Grab his little toothums. We could probably insert eyes at this point, but I won't as of right now. But yeah, we can start kind of, nothing crazy, because the moment we Z-remesh, that poly paint could go away, but make something cooler, it'll make it feel, make the color cooler on something that's already or not cooler, but if you desaturate a color on something, it'll start to feel slightly warmer. So it might look like I'm painting like red, but it's actually, as you can see, it's like this yellowish brown color. But it's because of, again, that color context that's surrounding the character that can make that look like it's green or look like it's warm red when it's actually not. I like adding a little bit of color, always just kind of helps start to flesh the character out a bit more. You don't want to do it too crazy to where like your color's taking over your form or anything like that, but just a little bit to kind of help bring out your character doesn't hurt, and they can feel more alive, because a lot of it too is we want to. That's where like putting in the eyes, for example, will help at a certain stage, because eyes are that window to the soul. That can most certainly help a lot. Smith said this escalated quickly. In a good way, I'm hoping. I think that sits right. Oh, it was just some stubby piece of clay when you left. Oh, okay. Yes, if you have joined in on these, you'll know that. Whoops. I tend to work fairly quickly. I will say that, which I think for streaming hopefully is fun to watch, because at least it's not like, okay, we're gonna be spending 2 months or whatever on just the block out. Like, hopefully my goal is by the end of this, you get something out of it. So I try to sculpt somewhat. I'm not sculpting fast, like this is kind of my normal pace of sculpting. I actually usually have to tell myself to slow down, because usually I'll sculpt too fast for my own good half the time, but for streaming purposes it works out great. So you can see how much color that brings him to life a lot more. And then what we can do too is I like to subdivide his eyeballs. Oops. We can paint in some eyeballs. I'm not sure what color his eyes are going to be yet, but we can just try. I'm going to change the alpha. I like putting the square alpha on my paintbrush, so I get kind of like these harder edges and it feels more painterly. I actually think orange might work better now I'm thinking about it. I'm just gonna put more like orange highlights and then make it darker, more like umber desaturated, so it'll be like a brownish kind of color as well. Just get like a fun mixture of colors in there, and then I can highlight the bottom with a little splash of orange. That adds like a pretty good highlight. And then you can change it to toy plastic. You can fill that. Now we get like a nice little highlight. And that adds like tons, right? Just that little highlight and coloring his eyes, we can start to get more of that character in there. So again, just fleshing out things to make it. The more you can start making your character feel like a character and less just like, you know, a lump of clay, I think the better off you'll be. And again, I don't spend tons of time on polypaint. Later we can always project the polypaint back with the ZRemesher, but usually I'll just end up redoing it most of the time. So I keep it just simple to get some like blocking colors while I sculpt and finish out, you know, the rest of it. And I'll get it depends on like how stylized the character is, but usually I will get to a certain point and then I'll just Z-remesh it, because if you start detailing even more, then you just have to do a bunch of like projecting, and that can be kind of a pain in the butt. So just trying to flesh out some more musculature here and try to find that blending point with his legs. And he's starting to come together. He's a fun shape. Did you see the difference to where I spent some time on the top versus where we kind of are with his legs, right? So starting to add that anatomy, and then even if we need to, dialing it back later is fine. But it's important to get it in there to just see what can be improved on. I'm just starting to get structurally where those volumes lie for like what's actually making up your silhouette. And start kind of, because I usually base, you know, a lot of the sculpt initially on the silhouette, and then it's really about just kind of trying to refine that volume and form that establish that silhouette. I'm just trying to clean up some of it, you know. When I'm sculpting here, I'm not really looking, I'm looking at the very edge of my sculpt, trying to get the silhouette to feel streamlined. So you can see like here in the back, I'm trying to carve away at that silhouette line to get something that feels a little cleaner. And then remembering volume, so, you know, I know that this is actually part of a bone that would also be on the other side, right? So, you know, just being very aware of what shapes are making what, and then making sense of them within your anatomy. You can see this is a little wobbly, right? So we can kind of push this out, push this in. You know, we can decide how long this is to And then we can also decide, maybe his feet are more like, I don't want to say dinosaur feet, but maybe they're like bigger than, like where his feet start are really kind of more back here. So the first knuckle of his big toes and stuff. Or kind of something more like that, and that'll dictate a lot of the shape that I choose to make. So if the knuckles are here, then this will all get like a little flatter and, you know, things like that. So we can get more of like almost like a dinosaur foot. It really does start to look like a dinosaur foot. And then also, to get feet right, I usually like to figure out where that paw pad is on the bottom. It's easier to figure out that silhouette of how your feet are from the bottom than anywhere else, so I like to go in the bottom and kind of figure that stuff out. There's just not enough topology really to do much more than what we have here. Like, if I try to do any more detail, I'll probably just fight with what I have. But I think that gives me about what I'm looking for. That's starting to come along. And then I can probably just insert a cylinder, and I'll just insert, I'm actually going to put in another cylinder, make it bigger because it's always small, and I'll add a few subdivision levels, and use the deformer to grab the edge of this and kind of taper it down really quickly. That's also like a uniform way of tapering it. A cute little tail, and then he's also got hair in my concept, so we can add that as well. I'm thinking if I want to. We have time, and so I'm just kind of blocking out the body today. But I think for the hair, I think I'll show you guys. I don't know if I've done this yet on stream. But I'm just going to go in with my curve brush that I have for characters. And I have this little hair brush that's like more stylized-ish hair. At least it works well for stylized hair. Where did his ears go? Oh wait, did I accidentally... Oh, I accidentally hit my history brush. Don't do that. That wouldn't have been good. Cool. So now that I have that, so by default it'll drag out kind of like that. It looks like he's looking at his hair now. But instead what I'll do is I'll change some settings here. And I'm going to try to change like the size of this so that way when I click it, instead of big to small, I want it to go from this way, like that, and then maybe that's a little too thin, so I'll make it a little thicker. There we go. So he has some hair, and he has kind of like a. It's actually on the other side, but this is how I kind of actually like to start hair, is keeping it really simplified. Is super helpful. So I'll split that off. And you can see when I smooth it, it'll look fine. And then lower the curve step a little bit, just so I can get a bit more resolution off of this, and then I can start to kind of add more hair. So I usually start with like the big chunks first, and then I can figure out like smaller and smaller details as I go on. And I'm not trying to get anything like super perfect. I just need a guide for basically just the direction that the hair is going to go in. So, I know this will probably stick out. Also, we'll be eventually looking at silhouette as well, as to see if that's going to be landing well. So I'm just kind of placing and moving, and again, it's just more of getting that overall direction the hair's going to go. I'll do some bigger strips, kind of going down the side. I'm just trying to have him lay down a little bit more. Maybe. So it seems kind of like maybe tedious, but I think this is actually, it's one of those things where I could sculpt this, with Dynamesh and like extract and do whatever, but ultimately I'd be going over it just like this again anyway. So for me, if I can just do my block out almost while also just placing the hair that I want, then I'd rather just do that from the beginning. So that's why I like doing it this way. And if I need to rotate or move anything, like these are so low res that I could easily warp and change all this stuff after the fact as well. So then once I have something that's, like this, now I can go in and kind of move stuff around a little bit. Figure out how much, take a look at that silhouette and see, how big do I want that hair to be? Do I want its hair to be kind of wild, or do I want it to kind of lay down? I don't mind the laying down. I think it kind of looks like a horse mane kind of thing. Makes them feel a little more manageable. And then anything that I feel like I need another layer of fur, I can just now duplicate. I can move and shift around. Usually this is a little too low for me, so I'll usually subdivide it once and then delete lower. And now I have something that's a little more accurate to what I have as like a final. But I like to start really low with this stuff. Back. I'm not sure if that's what I want. maybe it should be up. And then again, if this feels like too thin or anything, I can use my inflate. I can inflate the base of them to kind of flush them out a little more. Yeah, something like that maybe. I think these are too big in the back, but because I think it from the silhouette, it doesn't. It looks like it's curling too much. But again, that didn't take me all that long. So if I need to be like, I didn't really like it, or you know, I need to change whatever. It's pretty easy to go in and change or readjust or, you know, draw on some more curves. That's kind of the hair that I put in the concept before. He looks pretty friendly with his hair. He looks so cool now. His cool little fro hair. Says I can practically hear him saying bro with that hair now. Yeah, pretty much. He's just so chill. Just chilling, playing his lute, you know. We can always mess it up a bit more once I start sculpting on it, but so I'm kind of picturing it almost, I mean, we could stand it up a bit more and then it would look maybe a little bit more boorish, but that's also the idea of it, is to get some like boorish type stuff. And then we'll add some to his tail here. There you go. Add some, I think it's teeth here, and I'm gonna duplicate it, and then I will get rid of one. Because basically this works as a claw as well, so I'm just gonna reorient that. Insert mesh. Cool. Unsolo that, and I can hide that, and then I can go to where his hands are. And if I want to embed this more before drawing on, I can go to my brush depth, and I can change the depth of that, so that way hopefully it drags out on the inside a bit more. I can split that off, and then I can just draw these on. Now I have them, and then I can always adjust after the fact. It's just an easy way to put a little placeholder in there. His hands are pretty big. I like having the nail in there because it helps me. Whoops! Don't draw that. So it helps me like help find the direction of which way I want his fingers to face and stuff, and helps give a bit more guidance for when sculpting this stuff. You can kind of see what's looking uneven and looking correct, and all that stuff, all the good stuff. You could easily spend a whole 2-hour session on just hands alone if you really wanted to. I don't think I've ever really done that on this stream, but you totally can. Almost looks like as if the Beast and Simba combined to become an orc, then that's what I would get. JD Smith says all my sculpts were oven mitts. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea. I don't think I've used that one yet on the stream. Maybe one day I'll be like, I don't feel like it, guys. He's got ovens where oven mitts, or mittens because he's in the snow. And that's it. No more hands. I don't really want to start blocking out clothes because we're almost at time. So I think what I'll do now is I'll take his body, I'll paint it, and I'm gonna ZBrush it so that way I can subdivide it and have something a little bit more final by the end of this session. And I can start kind of sculpting more final on his body, because I think most of his body will probably still be visible. I might add some like cool gauntlets, and maybe he'll have like a cool like stitch sash thing, but I want most of his, and he'll have some pants, like some ripped pants and stuff, but his body's gonna be more part of this than some of the previous, sculpts that I've done. I think the last time I did something that didn't have a shirt was the fox, which was the first one I did. So I'm gonna run a I could have said use poly paint, but I don't want to use poly paint for density, so I'll just ZBrush it. And by default, for ZBrush, like for what I need it for, this is pretty good. But again, normally you would want to like combine all these parts and whatnot. In fact, I might do something where I probably don't need the feet and legs to be separate. So one thing that we can do just before is combine maybe these guys and combine the feet. Oops. Oh my gosh. do something more like that. And then I'll do a Dynamesh with that, so that way now the torso is all one shape and then the legs are all one shape. But everything else is still separate, and then I can then run a ZBrush on that. And if you've never joined the stream, I always pose at the end of my character, so what's easier for me is to select, you know, his whole hand like this, and I can mask it. I can grab this and, you know, mask this a little bit here. And then as long as the pivot's kind of in the right spot, for me this is easier to start moving your character around. And then I can move, you know, the anatomy and fix the anatomy a lot easier, basically, is what I like to do. Whereas before, if I had to, like, you know, if I remesh this as one whole shape, just for the sake of the stream, it's a lot more difficult because at the end we're just basically creating a maquette. So this just creates an ease of sculpting that I like more. So that's why I do that way. 3D Pixel asking if I brought one of my models into Mixamo and see it move. And I have used Mixamo, but I also know how to rig. I use a rigging tool. I use Maya, but I've also used Blender to rig characters. And yeah, I love making characters move. That's the part that's actually the most fun. It's very tedious to get to that point. Because you have to have a nice retop and then you know, get some UVs for your character's textures and all that stuff, and then you gotta rig it and whatnot. But it is the most satisfying process for sure. I don't think I actually need to project more. It's pretty much there it is, and I can just hide that, or I will save this as number 2. And I can just delete this one now. There we go. And now I have a body that's retopped. And I think I like the small teeth. If I need to, I can always make it bigger, but I like the small teeth for now. And I will drag that down here because I don't need to see that. But yeah, so I love posing. And I love rigging characters. I don't like the process of rigging, but I like what you get out of it. Obviously, is you get a functional, cool, movable character, and your character can really come to life. Like when I'm working on this stream, one of my favorite sessions is posing, because that's when the character, you know, gets its full personality, and it's just super cool and really rewarding to see that. Because if your character just stays in T-pose all the time, you know, it's just not super interesting, and you don't get the full feeling of your character. So, yeah, I'm all about making characters to make them move and come to life. That's a process you guys would want to see at some point, then we could do it. It's just not as exciting. So but it would be fun to actually, I wanted to bring one of these characters at some point into like a game res model and do some, like, you know, hand painted textures in Substance, and, you know, do that whole process, and then we could render it in Blender, or, you know, even just Marmoset or something. I don't know, it might be a little too much to, like, bring it into a game engine, but we could, technically. Sky's the limit, but all about what you guys would want to watch me do. The most boring part would probably just be watching me retop. Because I think rigging is interesting, and it actually doesn't take that long to rig with all the automated rigs that we get out there. You know, the little plugins and stuff, which is what I use. So that actually doesn't take that long. It's just the retop and baking and you know, doing the UVs, that takes a while. Just cleaning up the mesh now, because now I have a nicer topology. And in reality, if I was to rig this and stuff, I would split the toes so that way I could, you know, animate his little feetsies. I drink a lot, yeah. Rigging, the people that do it for a living, I thank thee for a lot of stuff, because I don't rig. I rig personally, but professionally, I'm not that equipped for that. You always run through basic rigging stuff for Gnomon, which is the knowledge that I carry with me now. How to, you know, I understand what rigging is. I can understand how to build out a rig and, you know, do all that stuff. But yeah, what they do is crazy. But they make my characters look awesome, so that's what I like about them. I appreciate rigging artists. We always need them. Yeah, retopping for me used to be a nightmare. I know what to do now with it, obviously. I've been doing this long enough that I have experience in, like, I know what kind of rig and what kind of mesh he would have to have. It's just boring. Like, it's just not very exciting. You know, there's no real challenge to that. So it's one of those things where you turn on music, you turn on a TV show, you sit and you plug away at your retop. That's pretty much all you can do. So, but once you're done, it's so rewarding. Like I love the end result of having a good retopped character, because now it's like an asset, and then you can go do whatever you want with it, and that's fantastic. That's the real power of doing something in 3D. So if you don't ever utilize, retopping and rigging your character, then, it's kind of a waste of time sometimes. Unless you're, doing it for 3D printing and stuff, which I do a lot of. But there's nothing more satisfying than seeing your character, like, move, to me. I've always been fascinated with animation, and it's something that I love and am passionate about, but want to get more into. Because I don't do it as like a gig or a job or anything. So on the side, I would like to get better at animating and stuff. Because it's so rewarding. It's so cool once you get to see your characters move. Alrighty, I think we pretty much can wrap up our character here. I didn't want to jump into his clothing and stuff, because there just wasn't going to be enough time to do anything else. I didn't want to start and then be like, and then now we're done, because there's still a lot of stuff that I kind of want to think about for how I want to put clothes on this character, because it's going to be slightly different from what I drew, because what I drew is so ludicrously simple. And I want to give him something like more fun and a little more complicated than that, and maybe kind of call back to the jester or like the bard costumes that I was looking at. So yeah, so we're gonna call it a wraps for today. So thank you guys for tuning in and hanging out with me. Always appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this process of our bard orc character. So far, I really like the sculpt and where it's coming. I think it's coming along pretty well. And so, yeah, go ahead and tune in next week, same time, Wednesdays, 7 to 9 now. And yeah, we'll start putting some clothing on this character and whatnot. And again, the end result is I work on a character a month if you guys are new to this. And at the very end, we pose them and do all that fun stuff. So don't miss out on those. It's always a lot of fun to see where the character starts and where it kind of ends up. And yeah, it's a cool process. So I will catch you guys next week. Again, this is Archetype, streaming from Gnomon, and we're sponsored by Dell. So thanks to them, and thanks to people behind the scenes always helping out with all that stuff. So we will catch you next week. Bye.